Before this video officially begins, there is a possibility that this could sorta be spoilery, so consider this your warning if you don't want to know what could potentially be happening with Generation 10. Okay, so with a spoiler warning in place, it is possible that we might know where the Gen 10 Pokemon region is going to be based. In the recent Terra leak, some things were mentioned about Gen 10, and while I'm not going to go into specifics, and there weren't any definitive details that gave us a direct confirmation, what was revealed brought forth some speculation regarding Gen 10's region that seems to be a legitimate possibility, and based on all the evidence, it could very well be what the Gen 10 region is actually going to be, and that is a region that is based on Greece. Again, none of this is directly confirmed, but there is enough out there to suggest that there is a good shot that the next Pokemon region could be based on Greece, and knowing this, it allows us to sort of envision what might be possible for Gen 10, including with its starter Pokemon. So today, based on this information that we have learned, I am going to show you what Generation 10's starter Pokemon could possibly look like if this speculation actually ends up being correct. And again, while it's not for sure, I think there is a solid chance of that happening. Otherwise, I wouldn't be doing this video. Alright, so with all of that setup out of the way, these are what I imagine a set of Greek starter Pokemon could look like. We have the grass type Rutedi, the fire type Fyrid, and the water type Pipamar. And I'm not only going to be showing you these three, but also their evolutions, so stay tuned for that. Starter Pokemon are obviously very emblematic of their respective regions, and while they can go in any number of directions with their designs, it is at the very least reasonable to assume that a trio of Greek starters would have a bit of a Greek flavor to them. Therefore, these three starters represent three major elements of Greece, and those would be its history, its mythology, and its culture. I'll try not to give too much away before we get into these Pokemon's evolutions, but those three elements are what formed the basis of these Pokemon, and these first stages essentially act as the first piece of that puzzle. With that said, let's begin with Rutedi. This grass type is based on a bear, and while the reason for that choice will become more apparent as we go along, I essentially thought a bear was something that could not only fit with the grass type well, but is also something that could be cute in its first stage, and then powerful in its final stage, which is pretty much essential for a starter design. For good measure, it's also based on a brown bear, which are present in Greece, and then its name reflects this inspiration as well as its grass typing, as it comes from root and teddy bear. Finally, the last thing that I will leave you with on Rutedi before we move on is that it is the starter Pokemon in this group that is representing Greek history. So that will come to play a factor in its evolutions, which I will reveal in a minute. For now though, let's move on to the fire starter of this bunch, and like I mentioned earlier, its name is Fyrid. Fyrid is primarily based on a goat, and this comes from the age-old connection between the fire starters and the Chinese zodiac. Admittedly, the most recent fire starter didn't really follow this at all, but given that the previous 8 match up with it almost perfectly, that is personally what I feel like I've got to go off of until I'm really proven otherwise. So for prediction's sake, that is what I went with, and of the 4 remaining unused zodiac signs, the goat felt like the best fit here. The name Fyrid also pulls from this Pokemon's goat origins, as well as it is derived from fire and kid, which is the name of a baby goat. And lastly, this is the starter that represents Greek mythology, so that will become a factor in its concept as it grows into its evolutions. This video has been made possible by today's wonderful sponsor, Manscaped. Manscaped is an amazing supporter of the channel, and their products are genuinely awesome. I use them every day, and right now it's a special time for Manscaped because they are partnering with the Testicular Cancer Society for Testicular Cancer Awareness Month. They're launching a special bundle to support the cause right now that includes a special edition version of the Lawnmower 5.0 razor, as well as a special pair of Manscaped's Boxers 2.0. The Lawnmower razor is point blank the highest quality razor that I have ever seen, as it has an extremely high quality feel. It's equipped with skin safe technology to prevent nicks and cuts. It's waterproof. It has a built-in LED light to make sure you don't miss any loose hairs, and that light can also be toggled on and off. It also has interchangeable blade heads, so you can go between a standard blade and a foil blade, and it's also wireless and rechargeable. Like, genuinely, regardless of the sponsorship, this is the best razor that I have ever seen or used. And you can grab one right now for 20% off plus free shipping by using the link in the description below, along with the code HoopsVGM at checkout. Picking anything up from Manscaped using this link and code also directly supports the channel and is a big deal in making my content possible. So it is extremely appreciated, and it also supports the cause of cancer awareness as well. So be sure to check that out with the link below, and thanks a ton to Manscaped for supporting the channel. However, there is still one starter that we need to talk about before we get into those evolutions, and that is the water type Pipimar. Pipimar is based first and foremost on a hippo, and this results from what I often mention about water starters in my videos, and that is the fact that due to their typing, they have to be the kind of Pokemon that can obviously be aquatic, while also being the kind of Pokemon that can naturally live on land. This is something that all of the water starters to this point fall in line with, and it's a unique restriction that the water starters have that the other starters really don't. So that is the primary reason why I went with the hippo starter. However, there are also other reasons that make a hippo starter a good fit in a Greek region as well. First is that while hippos are native to Africa, Africa isn't actually that far away from Greece, so it's not that much of a geographical stretch by any means. Second, it once again perfectly fits with the idea of something that can begin as very cute and then grow into something very powerful. And then third, the name hippopotamus actually has its roots in the Greek language. So despite all of the restrictions and parameters that there are for what makes a good water starter, and a good Greek water starter more specifically, I think Pipimar is able to fill all of them pretty well. I also really like the name of this little guy too, because Pipimar, in my opinion, has the perfect kind of cute sound to it, but then it's also got a ton of meaningful etymology too. It begins with the word pip, as in pipsqueak, referring to its small size, and then incorporates the word hippo. From there, it uses the word mar, which means sea and refers to its water typing, and that also doubles as coming from marble too. And the purpose of that, let's just say, will become apparent with its evolutions. It is also the starter of this bunch that is representing Greek culture, and one way that this is already being portrayed with Pipimar is that it uses a blue and white color scheme, which not only fits great with a water type, but those are also the colors of the Greek flag. So this little guy really does come together quite well in my opinion, and those are what some Greek starter Pokemon could potentially look like. We are just getting started though, because now we have got their evolutions to cover. So let me know which one of these 3 you would choose as your starter in the comments. And with that said, let's go ahead and get into the middle evolutions. We're gonna wrap back around to the grass type and start with Ruteti's evolution first, but I do need to give a big shout out to my guy Rgreywind, who drew the art of all of these designs. He helps me out a ton with these videos and does great work, and you can check him out if you would like with the links in the description. So when Ruteti gets strong enough, it will evolve, and when it does, it evolves into Grizzleaf. Grizzleaf remains a pure grass type at this stage, but it gains quite the macho vibe. This Pokemon would definitely be the cocky type, and it would think that it's the strongest thing out there, even though it clearly has much to learn as a middle evolution. The name comes from Grizzly and Leaf, reflecting its typing and bear inspiration, and even though I will pretty much have to leave it at that and save the rest for its final evolution, one thing that you might have noticed that I will mention is that Grizzleaf is wearing that iconic Greek wreath that is very symbolic of Greece as a whole, and that is what helped to inspire this Pokemon as a grass type, and really is kind of like the center of this Pokemon's origins and inspirations, which will become fully apparent once we get into its final evolution. However, it is now Fyrid's turn to evolve first, and when Fyrid evolves, it evolves into Pyrohorn. Pyrohorn grows in stature and in concept a bit, but it does still remain a pure fire type. I am going to have to wait to mention most of the inspirations behind this Pokemon until we get to that final evolution once again, but one of the traits of Pyrohorn that I can talk about that I thought was a lot of fun are that its horns are made entirely out of fire. And the idea is that it has some holes or some kind of glands on its head that produce this fire when Pyrohorn gets angry or whenever it's in a battle. This is actually a signature trait of this Pokemon, so much so in fact that that's also where its name comes from, as it derives quite directly from Pyro and Horn. There is more going on with this Pokemon as well, as I have alluded to, but we are going to have to save that for the final evolution. So for now, let's go ahead and see what Pipimar evolves into. When it gets strong enough, Pipimar will evolve into Hippolo. Admittedly a little goofy looking, Hippolo is a pure water type, and I feel like the concept behind it is pretty unique, but is also pulled off pretty well too. So as I mentioned, this line is inspired by and meant to represent Greek culture, and since culture is kinda arbitrary in terms of what that visually looks like, we ended up representing this idea of culture in the design by basing these Pokemon on Greek architecture. That is probably what a lot of people would think of right away when they think of Greece and its culture, as it's one of the things that Greece is most well known for. And this begins to take shape design-wise with Hippolo specifically, because its body is meant to resemble the iconic pillars that are such a famous part of that classic Greek image. It's pretty subtle, but you can see this with the markings on Hippolo's stomach that mimic the carved patterns of Greek pillars, as well as in its body color, which is primarily white, just like these pillars as well. This also continues on from representing the Greek flag like I mentioned with Pipimar, because while its color scheme represents the Greek flag as a whole, each individual color also represents something more specific too, like the blue representing the water type of this Pokemon, and now the white bringing in the architectural cultural element. Given the fact that it's inspired by a pillar, I also thought this was a really clever justification for this Pokemon becoming bipedal, as a lot of times when starters become bipedal, that kinda just happens just because. But here, it actually is for a reason that makes legitimate sense, so I thought that that was a pretty fun part of this design too. This is also where Hippolo gets its name from as well, as it comes from hippo and pillar. And once again, just like its pre-evolution, I feel like all of the elements blend together here quite well, even if they are a little more of a unique combination. And now, with Hippolo covered, those are the 3 middle evolutions to these potential Gen 10 starter Pokemon. The moment you have been waiting for is coming up next though, because it is now time to reveal the final evolutions of these starters. Beginning with the grass type once again, if you chose Ruteti, you saw it evolve once into Grizzleaf, and after raising and training it even more, it would evolve again into its final evolution, Barclaos. In its final stage, Barclaos becomes a grass fighting type, and now that this final evolution is shown off, I can really get into the inspiration behind this entire line of Pokemon. As a way to represent Greek history, these Pokemon are inspired by the Olympics, which are one of, if not the most iconic piece of Greek history ever. So much so that it even extends into world history as well. That is why these Pokemon are all wearing the iconic wreaths that I mentioned with Grizzleaf, because these wreaths are what would be given to victors of the original ancient Olympic Games, and the Olympic theme is what also inspired the fighting type for Barclaos as well. This even shines through in other parts of this Pokemon's design too, as the markings on its chest and stomach are meant to resemble a gold medal, which was a really fun thing to kinda sneak into this design. The name Barclaos, meanwhile, is quite representative of this Pokemon too, as it comes from bark for the grass typing, Arcuda, which is the Greek word for bear, and the Greek word kleos, which translates to glory, and that is derived from the Olympic theme of this Pokemon that I just went into. So there is your potential Gen 10 Greek grass-type starter Pokemon. But we do still need to look at 2 more final evolutions as well, so let's switch gears to Fyrid. This Pokemon first evolves into Pyrohorn as previously mentioned, and in its final evolution, it becomes Volcaram. Upon reaching this stage, this Pokemon becomes a Fire Steel type, and this all has to do with its inspiration. I mentioned earlier that Fyrid and its line represent Greek mythology, and they do this by being inspired by Hephaestus. Hephaestus is the Greek god of fire, volcanoes, metalworking, and blacksmiths, which pretty much covers not just its new steel typing, but also its fire typing too. The fire type representation in the design is pretty self-explanatory, but along with the new steel type, I wanted to portray this in the design with a blacksmith vibe that comes from those godly origins. This is done with its beard, which also comes from the goat inspiration too, being evocative of what a blacksmith might look like. Its hooves are also meant to resemble armor that it would have forged as a blacksmith as well, and it also has a chest plate made of the same armor-like material. This mythological inspiration is also where its name is derived from too, as Volcaram comes from Vulcan, who is the Roman equivalent to Hephaestus, and Ram, since this Pokemon also takes some inspiration from a ram as well. It is overall a very strong option if you decided to choose Fyrid, but what if you chose Pipimar instead? Well, it would first evolve into Hippolo, and then, when it was ready to evolve again, it would become Parthodon. This beast of a starter fully realizes all the concepts that went into its pre-evolutions to this point. It continues the architecture theme that started with Hippolo because, as you can see, it has the same markings on its body that are meant to resemble Greek pillars. But it also takes this one step further. It has this protrusion on its back as well, and this is not only meant to resemble the shape of a wave, and is not only meant to resemble its tail with that little curl at the bottom, but it is also meant to resemble Greek architecture as well, and more specifically, the distinctive shape and curl that many of these iconic Greek pillars were depicted with. For the sake of this video, I am simplifying that explanation a ton, but essentially it's got even more of the look of those iconic Greek pillars, all the while portraying its water typing and status as a hippo Pokemon too. And I really love how all of that blended together and turned out in this design. I also love the name of this Pokemon too, because Parthodon sounds extremely strong and cool in my opinion, and matches the look of this Pokemon perfectly, but it also works great in terms of its etymology. It comes primarily from Parthenon, the iconic Greek temple, which obviously ties to this Pokemon's architectural inspiration, and then the Dawn part of its name has multiple inspirations. It means Dawn as in leader, as the final evolution of this line. It means Dawn as in tooth, since hippos are well known for their teeth, and it also comes from Poseidon, the Greek god of the sea, which references its water type. And speaking of type, Parthodon ended up staying as just a pure water type, which I know may be disappointing, so I wanted to explain the thinking behind that. Originally, it was going to be a water fairy type to fit in with the second types of the other starters, and the plan was that each starter would have a secondary type that was strong against the starter that it normally was weak to. However, as the design of this Pokemon came together, it didn't really resemble a fairy type, or any other type for that matter. But I really loved how it turned out, so I just decided to roll with the design and leave it as a pure water type. This isn't exactly unheard of either, as other starters such as Blastoise and Sceptile also only have one type, while both of their counterparts have two types. So there is a bit of a precedent for this kind of thing in that regard, so I just decided to go with it since I liked how the design turned out so much. So these are what the starters of a Greek region could look like, and potentially what the Gen 10 starters could look like too. What do you think, and which one of these starters would you choose? Be sure to let me know in the comments, and leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. I will see you again soon with another video too, and until then, as always, thanks so much for watching this one. I really appreciate it, and I will smell you guys later.